amazing.
This is amazing. All right, let's go into this. Shalom Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live, and today we have a very special guest with us. Former Senator of Michigan, State Senator Patrick Colbeck, and amazing man in his stand when it comes to 5G. Also, we actually ordered his book, Draining the Swamp, An Outsider's Guide to Draining the Swamp, Wrestling Gators by Patrick Colbeck there. And it's kind of interesting, especially when he got into the 5G arena. I am sure he has some very big gators to wrestle. And me being from the South as it is, we know what gators are, and I wouldn't want to wrestle one. So anyway, thank you, Senator Colbeck, for being on Israeli News Live. And I'm sure, of course, this is a global channel. Everybody all over the world will be listening, many Americans as well. And I'm sure they're going to be blessed with what you have to say. And of course, we have Yana Ben-Nun, who'll be speaking in Portland, Oregon on 5G and the effects that it has there here coming up this coming weekend. So I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation we have today.
Yeah, especially because I am going to speak in about 2 days about 5G in Portland. I am very happy to have Patrick Colbeck with us. Thank you so much, Senator Colbeck, for being here. And I consider him an expert. He's not only a politician, but he is also a scientist, right? Can you please tell us about your credentials?
Well, a little bit of background. I'm actually an aerospace engineer. I got a bachelor's and master's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan. I attended the International Space University. I was a life sciences department graduate there. I worked on the space station, the environmental control and life support, as well as cabling design. And so a lot of the stuff we're talking about around electromagnetic interference and compatibility, I've got at least a rudimentary understanding of that. And luckily, I'm been blessed to be married to my wife, who's actually a pediatrician. So on the technical side, I feel pretty comfortable. She's got all the life sciences stuff nailed down. And when we added up everything that's going on in this area, and it's not just 5G, it's the whole wireless spectrum, it's something that's stacking layer upon us, an environment that we're not ready for yet. And so this is something that is a definite concern, and appreciate you guys' willingness to talk about this sensitive subject. I can tell you it wasn't easy for me to bring it up in the environment, and I'm a techie, so I came around saying that something was of concern. It took me a long while to get to that point, and but the evidence from my perspective is pretty much overwhelming and something we need to address, especially as public servants.
Well, we appreciate you as a politician that you care for American people, because this is not a common trait of politicians, really, to care for American people and children. But your wife being pediatrician, that's such a precious fact right there, because when I researched 5G, children are going to be more affected than humans, of course, and than adult humans, because of their skull is smaller, of course, and their body has a little more water. And as we know, the 5G affects water, and we are 70% water, so it's going to affect us on cellular level as well. So let's just get into this. And I know you spoke about all the technology, but I want to focus more on the 5G right now. Do you know what is the exact difference between 4G and 5G? Because that's what the common question is from people.
First of all, everybody knows that the first 1G was the first telephone call we had. Then we had texting 2G. Then we had first data at 3G. 4G was higher speed data. Now 5G is taken to the next generation, if you will. So that's the 5th generation of wireless technology is what it stands for. And the big difference between 5G and 4G is the frequency associated with that. I mean, we're typically in the microwave range with the 4G, 3G communications. Now we're heading up into the 24 to 90 gigahertz spectrum. And just for references, the active denial system used by the military for non-lethal crowd control is sitting around 94 gigahertz. So we're right up in that area. And that frequency, when it's used and directed at people, actually provides a stinging sensation on the skin. And so the big difference from a coverage perspective is that 5G systems, because they operate at a higher frequency, it's very difficult for those waves to actually penetrate solid objects like walls. And so to make up for that, instead of having a cell tower one every 2 miles or so, which is what you have with the current 3G, 4G technology, now you got a case where you're going to have it potentially every 2 to 10 homes. They're going to be fixed, quote unquote, small cells sitting in your neighborhood, and due to a lot of legislation and public policy that's been adopted of late, you're not going to have any say over whether or not that's put outside your house or not.
So you talked about frequencies. It's 94 gigahertz. It's actually a weapon that military uses, and I guess they use it to disrupt people when they are on strikes or protests. So I would characterize this 5G with that kind of frequency as not even a technology, but I would characterize it as a weapon. Is that what they're doing? Are they deploying weapons in our neighborhoods?
Yeah, it is a communication mechanism. But yeah, I mean, I just want to put that in perspective. Obviously, those are higher power thresholds when you're using the active denial system. But just to put it in context of what frequency we're talking about, I mean, that is a concern. And it's this whole area of layer upon layer of wireless radiation that's really concerning. You nailed it, that the most susceptible population are the kids. And it's because they're growing. They're doing cell replication on a regular basis. And if you're sending signals in there that can mess with that cell replication, all of a sudden what they thought was supposed to be an A in their DNA cycle turns into a G, and bad things happen. So it's really at the molecular level, at the cellular level, this is something that is of concern, because each person is, we're essentially walking, talking wire harnesses. That's how the body operates. And if you start throwing some random signals at it that it wasn't designed to accommodate, that's something of concern. And different people are affected in different ways. My wife was very sensitive to it. She had serious tinnitus. And we would go around to a lot of doctors and ask them, hey, what's going on here? What's causing this tinnitus? And not one of them, and she's a doctor, she knows what questions to ask. Not one of these doctors could nail down what was actually happening to her. And there's also some thyroid issues. Well, turned out it was wireless radiation in our home. We turned off the Wi-Fi router. We turned off, which you can turn on, in periodic bursts. It's not you can still have access to technology. We went to corded phones instead of the cordless phones. We got opted out of our smart meters, and lo and behold, her tinnitus is gone. Wow. Same thing happened with their parent with their cardiac arrhythmia. They had serious cases of AFib on a daily basis. We moved their router downstairs, lower intensity. They turn it off at night. Now all of a sudden, her father, who needed a pacemaker, no longer needs a pacemaker.
That is amazing. That's amazing. And you know how many people have hormonal disruptions these days, and they probably don't know it might be due to their Wi-Fi in the house. Yeah. And a lot of other issues. And as I told you before we started this program, my own experience in Czech Republic, which is a testing ground for 5G, they're testing it on East Europeans right now. As we speak, BMW is testing vehicles, self-driving vehicles in Czech Republic. So my son was affected greatly because they sold us this little device, and at the time I wasn't aware it's 5G. That's not what they call it there. And they said, we are testing this, and it's going to bring you a great internet to the whole house. And I was excited because we needed to work, so we needed a good connection. And we put it very close to the room where my son has a room. And next thing we knew was that his whole body had rash. And these rashes would come and go, but daily, 2-3 times, he would just break up in hives. And very strange. So we gave him Benadryl, thinking, maybe he ate something, or there is something different in air in Czech Republic than in USA. We didn't know. But I started the research, and then I started finding out that, wow, what they gave me, that's actually 5G. So I have a 5G in my house. My son has hives all over his body, and he described it, Senator, as something. It was not just that he had these breakouts or whatever that was, but he said that it was hurting him. It was like
he said he felt like he's on fire.
Yeah, he said, Mom, I feel like I'm on a fire. Like it's hurting me, like it's warm. So that was strange. And now that you're speaking about this weapon that military uses at the same frequency that we are about to roll out in our neighborhoods, that's a scary thing. Yeah.
It is, Mary. And it correlates exactly what you said, correlates with some of the studies that they have done. Actually, it was Israeli scientists that actually did studies on the effects of 5G broadcasts. And because of the wavelength we're talking about, it doesn't penetrate much further than the skin. But the skin is what's absorbing it, and you saw it with the rashes. That's exactly what the science has actually demonstrated as a result of this. So,
Yeah.
and some people are more sensitive than others. Your son's an example of what I call a mining canary. They used to carry those little canaries down into the mines, and if the canary passed out, well, odds are that something bad was on the way for the miners, and they should get out of there because there's some noxious gases that they have to be aware of. We've got a lot of people in our communities that right now, frankly, are being ridiculed because they're hypersensitive to some of these issues. And they shouldn't be. They're actually providing a good service saying, guys, there's something to look out after on this. And it's important that we start not just talking about the benefits, which you were pitched, right? All the higher download speeds, you'll have great access to the Internet of Things. We have to start looking at the risks too. And I'm convinced as an engineer, once you understand what the risks are, you can design a system to go off and provide a lot of these benefits without the risks. And that's kind of where I'm trying to push things. As a matter of fact, we had a forum back on December 8th where we had international experts from all over the world come to Lansing, Michigan, where we had the first of its kind forum discussing both the benefits and the risks. And the risks are pretty significant. And it's not just health effects, it's personal data security, and it's also national security.
Right, and when you speak about how they're selling it to us, that we need it because we need higher speeds and all kinds of stuff. But one of the things on the conference that you mentioned, and we will provide links for people so they can see it, but I don't remember his name, but he was speaking about benefits of 5G, and he was particularly talking about how many people die in car accidents in the United States. And of course, that's true. That's true, they do. And that the self-driving cars would be saving lives, and how many thousands of lives, right? Because the self-driving cars are not going to have accidents like humans have accidents. In fact, I don't know, I knew exact percentage about how much it would save in car accidents, and insurance companies, how much they would save. So what's your take on that when you hear this kind of benefits and somebody arguing those points, right? So what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, I think the person you're referring to is Frank Clegg. He's the former president of Microsoft in Canada. And I actually put him on the spot at that forum because I wanted him to provide an industry perspective of the benefits. Now, he no longer works at Microsoft because he understands the risks outweigh the benefits.
Wow.
And so this is a case where I put him on a spot and he had to make the case from an industry perspective. So apologies to Frank on that right now. But that's what it comes down to. Whenever it's a trade-off. In engineering, they call it a trade-off. And you go off and say, guys, here are the benefits, and there are some undeniable benefits. Maybe it is improved safety around autonomous vehicle. But there are significant risks. And maybe there's another approach to actually solving that same problem that doesn't involve those risks. But until we recognize that there's a risk, nobody's even looking at those other solutions. And that's the problem we're at right now. Now, I think I mentioned earlier already, I did not come to this position easily because you can line up all my personal communication devices ever since the first Palm Pilot. I've had a PDA, and as soon as it started to be able to make phone calls, I adopted them, and I've been an early adopter of technology for quite a while. But those benefits that I enjoy and I really appreciate, we really do have to start addressing those risks. And so when you talk about the benefits to personal safety, that's nice, but you got to balance it out with the discussion of those risks, or it doesn't hold any weight with me.
Right, at what cost? What's the cost?
I do want to ask a quick question, Senator Colbeck, because you had mentioned earlier about some things that your wife had suffered just because of the wireless technology in your home. I'm assuming that is probably 4G. And it's interesting that you mentioned this, and I'd like to know what that technology is as well, because we'd been discussing here in our home about taking and shutting off the Wi-Fi on a nightly basis, and then trying to also make sure that all the computers in the house that can be wired by the cat cable instead would be done to limit the amount of Wi-Fi that's used in the first place. So can you kind of weigh in on that issue?
Well,
too?
now we're going to solutions. I mean, here on my notes, I say let him speak about solutions. So
Okay, but yeah, I didn't want to get away from that issue because that's still the point is that if this is 4G in the home, it shows too that 4G also comes with its own risk, and what can we do to minimize those risks
okay.
without stopping the 5G debate?
No,
here.
it's okay. Yeah.
No, well, it's kind of all, like I was saying, it's a kind of a layer cake, and we've been building these layers of different wireless communication devices for quite a while. Actually, my engagement on this started with a discussion around smart meters. We had pulsating smart meter installed off of our home, and I think I was mentioning to you earlier, you know, the first indication that something was not right was actually our plant that was sitting right outside, right about 5 feet away from that smart meter, started getting browner and browner and browner, and started right after the install. I put up a little mini Faraday cage on the outside to decrease the emissions coming out of it, and all of a sudden the plant started getting greener and greener and greener. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out something bad is happening there.
That's right.
Well, it turned out that my wife was having some of the same effects from that smart meter. And you're right, Steve, we actually went off and I decided to do an experiment because I did not want to do this. I like my Wi-Fi. I like being able to turn it on when I want to turn it on. I can connect my phone to it. I save on my data charges for my phone. It's really nice. But we did an experiment. And so I turned off the Wi-Fi. And that's in the 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz band, if you will, because we had a dual band wireless router at home. And so I turned that off, and sure enough, her tinnitus went away. Now, there were some other things that I found out along the way, is that also our cable modem and wireless router were one device. And it turns out that the cable provider was using our home as a hotspot. So I could control 2 of the channels, they controlled a 3rd channel. And I could not turn that off remotely. I had to call them up to actually remove it. And eventually I got rid of their router because every time the power went out, it would reset and turn back on without letting us know. So I ended up hardwiring, like you talked about, putting Cat5 wiring all the way through the house. So the basement ceiling doesn't look very pretty right now, but it is functional, and we've got all the same access to the internet, but we have a zero-emission home now, and it is possible. As a matter of fact, it's even more secure without the wireless communications. I mean, you can actually have a hardwired connection that is faster and it's more secure, and there are people that will come around, drive around neighborhoods trying to get into people's personal networks. We've stopped the gentleman that was sitting out in front of our home with a computer going off and scanning Wi-Fi's and getting into personal networks. That does happen. And so there are some other reasons to pursue turning off the Wi-Fi at home as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you talked about solutions for 4G, and at what gigahertz 4G operates?
The 4G, and it varies all across the world, I mean, on the different communications, but they're usually in the microwave transmission area, which is around 2.4 gigahertz.
Okay, and 5G is what gigahertz?
Yeah, 5G is 24 to 90 gigahertz.
Wow. So,
and the emphasis is on hertz.
Now, even though that you did all these precautions, if they roll out 5G and put the device on a pole next to your house,
yep.
Whatever you did at home right now, is this going to help you?
No, it's no, obviously we're not begging for faster download speeds. We're not begging for all the stuff that they're selling us right now. Yes. It's not demand driven. So it gets to something it's kind of a popular push right now in political circles, is that we're in a race against the Russians and the Chinese for 5G technology and deployment of that technology.
That's exactly right.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with the recent recently, I think it was a COO or a CFO of Huawei, the Chinese technology company it's actually one of the largest wireless communications companies in the whole world. and they've got a lot of their technology embedded in the communication networks here in the United States and in Canada. Well, the Canadians held her because they were concerned about some of the financial transactions, and I don't remember the details around it, but the bottom line is this 5G technology, there are national security implications for it as well. That's why she was held back. I think she's since been released, but it created quite an international storm. And from a policy perspective, people are trying to promote the deployment of this technology, but when you actually look at the folks responsible for national security, they're the ones putting up a hand saying, stop it, wait a second. A lot of the people that are providing this technology do not have our best interests in mind.
That's right, that's right. So do you have any knowledge of any solutions? Let's say they're going to roll it out. It looks like they are. It looks like they don't care. You know that President Trump has signed an executive order for a rollout.
Yep.
So he doesn't show any concern for our biology. As you know, 5G and our biology, we are not compatible. However, 5G is called the fourth industrial revolution, and it is a part of making America great again economically. Because as you said, they are in a kind of race war with China, Israel, Russia, even Saudi Arabia. And I don't know if you guys know that Saudi Arabia has built its Neom city, which is like AI city, and that's where it's all heading, to smart cities and all of that. So this is something that I kind of feel we cannot avoid. So are you aware of any solutions that are out there for us? What can we do to protect ourselves from 5G?
Well, first of all, some good news. I don't think this is a major tenet of President Trump's administration. So this is not something he campaigned on. It's not something he pushed. He's just saying, "Oh, this sounds good. It's good for America. Let's go off and push it." So
maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he doesn't know the biology connection.
Now, having said that, I did talk with Ajit Pai, who's the FCC chair. I actually provided him a copy of the paper highlighting both the benefits and the risks, and I wanted him to address that. And 2 days later is when he issued that declaratory ruling from the FCC saying, no longer can any of the locals or states do anything to stop the rollout of 5G. It's a matter of national importance. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, I have some concern that when the FCC chair is pushing that, and by the way, FCC is known as a captive agency. And what I mean by a captive agency, it means it's actually ran by the same people that it's supposed to be regulating. So Ajit Pai is a former Verizon wireless lawyer. And there's a habit of people that come from the telecommunications industry to go off and serve as the FCC chair and make these declaratory rulings. Unless you're really spun up on the details of what is involved with this policy, if you're President Trump's shoes, you're just going to sit there and take the advice of your advisor, especially on a highly technical subject. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if Donald Trump has ever had to worry about configuring his own home Wi-Fi before, but so this is probably not something he's addressed. So it comes down to a fundamental problem for all of us, and from a policy perspective, and I kind of outlined it in 5 stages of wireless technology risk awareness.
Okay.
And right now, the vast majority of people, probably 99.9% of people, are at stage 1, which I call denial, right? There's nothing wrong. We're well within FCC acceptable limits, and they ignore the fact that the acceptable FCC limits are orders of magnitude above the limits where we see harmful biological effects.
Right.
Stage 2 gets into anger, where we're going, hey guys, I've studied this. I understand everything that's going on here. Why isn't the government going off and doing anything about this, right?
I'm beyond that stage now. So going to the other one.
We're just bargaining. So we say, all right, guys, we know we can't eat the elephant all in one bite. We got to do it in little bite-sized chunks. Mm-hmm. So let's go off and say, can you just at least give us local control? Let local units of government go off and make the decision that maybe we can just create a little wireless radiation-free zone here. If nothing else, is maybe a controlled experiment. And recently in Michigan, we fought the good fight against a bill that would have gotten rid of all this local control. We lost. which leads me to stage 4, which is depression. So you go off and you're frustrated by the fact that it seems like you're butting your head up against a wall. But I'm telling you, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Just like with what happened in the tobacco industry. I mean, they got the AMA, the American Medical Association, on board. They got all these people saying, no, there's nothing to worry about, just like we're seeing here with the telecommunications industry. It's safe, it's not a problem. Eventually, the truth can't be bottled up. It can't be hidden. And finally, we're going to get to that stage 5, which is acceptance. When we get it,
I'm worried what happens with all these people that have to be affected, children that have to be affected by the time that light comes and by the time they realize what happened.
Yeah, like the smoking industry. Where so
like
many
smoking
people
industry,
died of
how many
cancer.
people were affected, are still affected, but do you know what I mean? I mean, what's the light then at the end of the tunnel?
Well, you know what? Let me just mention this here real quick, too, because Senator Colbeck brought up an issue that is probably being pushed, especially in the political circles in Washington, D.C., and that is the Russians and Chinese, especially after Vladimir Putin issued a public statement saying that whoever controls the AI of the world will rule the world. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can't have the AI technology without a 5G technology to facilitate that particular issue there. So this may be one of the reasons why. And of course, in Russia, it's kind of like in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is still under the Soviet type of mentality. They're still under a communistic way of life, even though they have the freedoms now. So the government does things and they never tell no one. It's kind of like vaccines. In Eastern Europe, you have no idea what's in your vaccines. The same thing with your internet. They don't tell the people the risk. They don't even publicize it until it's too late.
That's right. So that's what we are worried about. Like, you see, I got 2 children. You have children. Your wife is a pediatrician. How many children is she going to see damaged by the time they realize something, that something is wrong? So what do you suggest we should do? Do you think we should get together in communities? Education is the key, I believe.
Yeah, I think education is the start. And so when you start talking about Russia and this challenge that we have to go off and who can push 5G faster, I think before we even get to the artificial intelligence stage, there's something else that's a little more important. And we focus a lot on the adverse health impact, but that risk to personal data privacy and risk to national security is also a concern. I don't know if you guys have watched what they're doing in China with all their big data. They've adopted something called the social credit system. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. We are. Mm-hmm.
So every citizen is going to be rated from a 1 to 1,000 and based on how trustworthy they are as a citizen. Now, really, that measure of trustworthiness is their allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party. So if you speak badly about them, you get debited on your social credit system. If you speak favorably, you get positive. If you do things that they accept as good behavior, then you go up. Now, the impacts of that are if you don't have a sufficient social credit score, you can't buy a plane ticket, you can't buy a train ticket, you can't send your kid to a private school because they have a cashless society. So everything is controlled electronically, and your ability to do anything is controlled electronically. That's the finish line that these guys are in a race to go off and do. And for governments like China and Russia, which are totalitarian governments, that may be exactly the finish line that they want to go off and push for. But and in America in particular, we value this thing called freedom.
That's right.
And they're kind
of,
we're right now in this rush where we're pursuing the benefits of convenience of all these little gadgets in our lives, but we're forgetting the fact that we're essentially getting lulled into a set of complacency, and we're giving up that very, very precious freedom, which many people, even more than are getting infected by this 5G rollout right now, many people died to protect that precious gift of freedom.
Yes.
And that's a multi-generational loss if we do it. So I'm very concerned about this on many different levels, and it's well beyond the immediate health impacts.
Yes, and health is freedom. That's what I wanted to say. Health is our most precious possession.
Yeah.
And health of our children. And let me talk a little bit about, Senator, here about the 5gappeal.eu page. You might not be familiar. This is something from Europe, and I'm watching this. But January 1st, 2019, 217 scientists and medical doctors have signed the appeal, and where they are warning about 5G. And they're asking the European Union representatives to stop rolling out 5G. And here, I will just read very briefly here what they're saying, what the risks are. Okay, it says that numerous recent scientific publications have shown that EMF affects living organisms at levels well below most international and national guidelines, just like you say, Senator, the same thing. And effects include increased cancer risk, okay, cellular stress, increase in harmful free radicals, genetic damages, that's major. It affects our DNA, and genetic damages, structural and functional changes of reproductive system, especially in boys.
Yeah.
Okay, and learning and memory deficits. It's like creating zombies almost, okay? Neurological disorders and negative impact on general well-being on humans, and not to even talk about animals, insects, and plants. That all of biology, all of the creation is going to be affected. So we have to take some very serious steps as citizens. And you know how they talk about wall being such a national emergency? Okay, fine. I'm not going that route right now to talk about it. But what is a true national emergency is that 5G rollout and its effects on us as human beings.
Yeah, I call wireless radiation in general the #1 environmental concern of our day, because it affects every single person. Sometimes it's very evident how it impacts them, as in the case of your son. But for many people, it's much more subtle. I mean, there's no doubt everybody in their family has been in touch with somebody with cancer. Yes. I highlighted we've got issues with cardiac arrhythmias and the need for pacemakers in families when they have AFib due to interference from this electromagnetic radiation. And my wife had her tinnitus. So there are all these different effects. Sometimes they're not manifest in a way that everybody can go off and look at it. And then, but all the naysayers, whenever you say that, I mean, that long list, they say, well, it can't obviously impact everybody. It's more like Munchausen syndrome, right? They think it's you're just making it up. And when you actually look at I mean, your background's in biology, you look at how the body operates. I mean, every cell has this little positive and negatively charged gateway into the cell to go off and get into things like DNA replication. And if you're going off and sending a bunch of random electrical signals that are just flipping the switch, you know, on and off on a random basis, all of a sudden your cell is going to start getting confused. And it's going to manifest itself in a variety of different ways, which correlates to all these different adverse health impacts and the variety of health impacts that we're seeing. So it is perfectly consistent with what you'd expect if you understand those basic biological mechanisms that are getting disrupted. So it is a concern. There's a lot of naysayers out there. It's going to take some time, unfortunately, and a lot of people, unfortunately, may suffer in the interim. But the direction we're headed in is not sustainable. It's not something that's healthy, and it's not something that's safe. Not just from a national security perspective, because a lot of the technology that's out there, we didn't even get into it, that Huawei and other 85% of USA's motherboards are manufactured in China. And I don't know if you heard about it, but they got a little microchip that's been installed on the motherboards to provide backdoor network access to those microprocessors. Well, our electrical networks are all based on these processors. A lot of our communication networks are based on it. So they essentially have a backdoor access into everything that as we increase our dependence upon this technology, we increase our risk. And so it's health, it's national security, frankly, it's our freedom in general that is very much at risk with this unfettered deployment. And the shame of it is there is a way to get access for communications, get that access to the Internet of Things in a safe way that doesn't have these adverse health impacts. But like we said before, I mean, just with alcoholism, first step in solving the problem is to recognize you do have a problem.
Right, exactly. Well, now, you might not know, but I had a very big health issue, and I was in remission and doing really well. And just now, we just got again some news that I don't like to hear. So I wonder if this is from all these wireless and all this. So when you speak cancer, that's definitely true. And then also, I just want to tell you about the skin. As you said, that yes, our skin is the primary organ that absorbs 5G, but what's in our skin are vitamin D receptors. And the major effects of 5G will be the vitamin D insufficiency, meaning that your body cannot get in the vitamin D that you need, no matter how much vitamin D you take orally. It will not be able to be absorbed in your body. And what's really interesting is the effects of 5G and vitamin D deficiency are like the same. They're the same.
And mentioning that on vitamin D, vaccines themselves block the absorption of vitamin D as well. And women are really suffering, have no idea, especially if they've have been, say, to university, college level, and had to have vaccines in the last, say, 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. But if you go back to my generation, when we didn't have these types of vaccines growing up, and never got them later in life. I mean, I got them in the military, but other than that, don't really have any vaccines whatsoever, so I don't have those issues. But if they do it in the 5G, they found a new way. Whether they're doing it intentionally or not, it could just be the side effect, so I don't want to accuse them of that. But the point is, it's still having the same effect that the vaccines are having, and that's going to really increase a tremendous amount of health problems, even more so than what we already have with other issues.
But we are so happy that you are addressing this and fighting for American people and educating them. So we want to take your material and get it out to the public. So what else can you tell us, especially in solutions and the light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I think, first of all, we're not alone in this. So it's not just you guys and me and my wife that are doing this. There are a lot of people all over the world. You talked about the resolution in Europe. There's a group called the Baby Safe Project here in the United States, where a variety of doctors got together and signed a declaration very similar to that. We've got MD Safe Tech, which is a great facility, Physicians for Safe Technology, that go beyond identifying the health impacts to providing some practical safeguards that you can put forward to protect yourself. Also, the Environmental Health Trust is a great organization, and that has a lot of those safeguards. Just one word of caution for everybody. When you start talking about this, they say, well, we should do a study on that. And that's just, being from the political realm, that just means I don't want to deal with it right now. We'll wait for the next guy to go off and address it. And they just kick the can down the road. There are thousands of studies documenting the adverse health impacts associated with this technology. We just got to start looking at it and actually reading it and putting it into action. So all these organizations that I was mentioning, and there's so many more, they're a great repository for this information. So I would suggest that all the viewers that are online right now, that are watching this, they actually start sharing some of those websites with their friends and family. Start taking some of those practical safeguards. If you're not ready to completely pull the plug on your Wi-Fi or whatever, at least turn it off at night. Put your Wi-Fi router on a timer. When you're walking around with your phone, I've got just turn on airplane mode. When your laptop is plugged in, even if it's hardwired in, turn it on airplane mode as well, and shut down your Bluetooth and your Wi-Fi broadcast on it. There's meters that you can buy commercially that can actually help detect what the environment is like in your home. I mean, I think it's typically 3 to 6 microwatts per square meter. That is kind of the threshold you want to stay at or below, which is orders of magnitude below what the FCC recommends, by the way. But if you're in that level of exposure, power density levels, that's good. But there are some practical steps. So the big thing is, do not despair. If this is a case where, just like what happened with the tobacco industry, eventually the truth got out there. And each person that's listening to this can help be part of that truth squad, if you will, to get that word out and let people know about it. I mean, I've been talking about this for over a year. I let all my colleagues know about the adverse health impacts. They all have the documented studies, and they still chose to go off and approve the deployment of 5G. And so there's a big hurdle to get over. But the one good news out of that whole story, if there is, was that we had more people voting in opposition to it than any other state anytime one of those bills was put out. So it's just a matter of moving the needle of awareness, going through those 5 stages, that going from denial to anger to bargaining to depression, and then finally we get to that acceptance stage, that stage 5, where everybody can understand that, yes, this is a concern, but there are ways to go off and safeguard us against that technology. But you first got to admit we got a problem. And from my aerospace background, I remember the expression, Houston, we have a problem. Well, world, we do have a problem on this, and we have to address it.
Yeah.
Senator Colbeck, let me ask you real quick, just as I know we're probably getting close to winding down now. In your book, Wrestling Gators there, do you deal with the 5G debate in this book here, or are you looking at possibly you and your wife maybe co-authoring a book together in the near future on the subject?
Oh, that's something else for the to-do list, I guess. But no, in the book, what I talk about is how government really works behind the scenes. So if you want to influence the policymakers, I think it's very useful in that, because I talk about how a bill becomes a law. I talk about the different tactics that kind of the folks in the swamp like to use to impede good principled policies. And so it's really kind of a how-to book for people that want to affect the public policy debate. So that's, I think, the primary benefit. I don't talk specifically about 5G in there, not that I recall. I had to, before publishing it, I had to scrub about 100 pages of this thing to get it out there. So that might be in volume 2 that we release down the road. But I really want to get people to understand how policy works. If you really want to change things, if you really want to stop the unfettered deployment of some of these technologies and get them to wake up to how it's impacting real people's lives, you got to understand how the political system works. And that's what I try to focus in on with Wrestling Gators. And it's I call it Wrestling Gators, an outsider's guide to drain the swamp. The reviews that we've got on this have been fantastic. It's up on Amazon.com in Kindle and in paperback format. But I encourage you to check that out if you want to become a more effective policy advocate.
Very nice.
We'll post all of that in the description below for you guys as well, so you'll know how to be able to look at this information, as well as Senator Colbeck has given us a vast amount of information that'll be in the description below as well from the conference. And if you can let people know as well, Senator Colbeck, how people can access this, if there's like a one-stop place that they can see all this information as well, because what you sent me is incredible.
Well, the best place to start is up on YouTube. I've actually got a Patrick Colbeck YouTube channel. If you go into that YouTube channel, you'll be able to access all the videos from the panel, from the forum that we had, and they're in bite-sized increments. I mean, essentially, I asked all these forum participants who have a storied career on this particular subject. I mean, one of the presenters, his name is Dr. Ron Melnick, was actually one of the lead researchers on the 14-year, $25 million study to end all studies on cell phone radiation that declared that there was clear evidence of carcinogenic effects. He was actually at our forum, and I asked him to try to summarize everything in 10 minutes, and they did. So all these are in little bite-sized chunks, and you can go to YouTube and search for Patrick Colbeck, and if you go to that YouTube channel, it's in there. Plus, I've updated all those YouTube videos to have links to all the different websites, like the Environmental Health Trust website, so that people can get access to that directly from those videos as well.
Excellent, excellent.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I mean, you are like a breath of fresh air, because being in politics and actually taking these kind of steps, that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you guys for getting the news out, because this is with the media, this is important. This is an important thing. That's how we get the truth out. And you guys taking on a difficult subject. I mean, when's the last time the media went beyond a 1-minute summary of a complex story, right? This is a very complex story. There's a lot of nuances to it. you guys have dedicated the time to getting the truth out, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And
Thank
sometimes what it does affect some of the larger networks as well. I know a lot of times we bring out stories, RT gets a little jealous, and they'll put up a more of an in-depth study on it as well, or even BBC. Both of those kind of watch pretty close what we put out. So hopefully it'll definitely have a greater impact. So. Thank you very much, and thank you guys for watching. Definitely share the information. I would encourage you as well. Subscribe to Senator Colbeck, Patrick Colbeck, his YouTube channel. It'll be there in the description below. That way, if he loads up anything in the near future as well, you'll have that access to that information, because it is a vital information. And I'm sure when we see Dr. Pigeon this weekend, he's also taking up the 5G debate, and so I'm sure he'll be very interested in this interview we've done here today with Senator Colbeck. Thank you again,
Thank you
Senator.
so much.
Thank you, guys. God bless.